I never believed in fate, but looking back now, I wonder if that estate sale was always meant to find me. Or maybe it was the other way around. It was a grey October morning when I pulled up to the Riverside Mansion, one of those sprawling Victorian houses that loom over the Connecticut River like a monument to old money and older secrets. The for sale sign had been up for months, but the estate sale was only happening now, nearly a year after the owner died. No family, I'd heard. No one to claim anything. My name is Don Wilson, and I teach theology at Whitmore College, a small liberal arts school tucked into the hills of New England. It's the kind of place where students come to find themselves, and professors come to hide from bigger ambitions. I'd been doing both for the last 3 years, ever since the divorce. I wasn't looking for anything in particular that morning. Estate sales were just something I did on weekends now, filling the silence that used to be filled by another person. Books, mostly. Sometimes, old religious texts for my classes. Anything to occupy the hours. The basement was where I found it. Most people were upstairs, picking through costume jewelry and depression glass. But I've always been drawn to basements, to the things people hide away and forget about. This one smelled like mold and old paper, with a single bare bulb swinging from a chain. The trunk was in the corner, half hidden behind a broken rocking chair and some mildewed curtains. Locked, but the lock was rusted through. I forced it open with a screwdriver I found on a nearby workbench. Inside, wrapped in what might have once been velvet, but was now just grey rot, was a Bible. I've handled hundreds of old Bibles. You develop a sense for them after a while. The weight of the paper, the flexibility of the binding, the particular smell of aged leather and decomposing glue. This one felt wrong immediately. Not wrong like damaged or fake. Wrong like it shouldn't exist. It looked like a King James version at first glance. Black leather binding, gold edge pages, the right size and shape. But when I picked it up, it was heavier than it should have been. The leather felt warm, almost feverish. And there was a smell, faint but distinct, like copper pennies left in the rain. Found something interesting? I nearly dropped it. The estate manager stood at the bottom of the stairs, an elderly woman with iron grey hair pulled back in a bun. I hadn't heard her come down. Just an old Bible, I said, holding it up. Family heirloom? Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or fear. Take it, she said. Please, $20. The tag says 50. 20, I insist. I pulled out my wallet, but she was already backing toward the stairs. Just leave the money on the trunk. I need to help someone upstairs. She was gone before I could say anything else, her footsteps quick on the wooden stairs, almost running. I left $30, because the look on her face had been worth the extra 10. Something about this book had frightened her, and I wanted to know why. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of whiskey and opened it for the first time. The house was quiet. It's always quiet now. After Jennifer left, I'd thought about moving somewhere smaller, but inertia is a powerful force, so I stay in this rental house with its creaking floors and drafty windows, with rooms I don't use and furniture meant for 2 people. I opened the Bible to they created the heaven and the earth. I stopped, read it again. They? I flipped back to check the title page, but there wasn't one. No publication information, no printer's mark, no date. Just the text starting immediately with Genesis. I went back to the passage. They, plural. Every translation I'd ever seen used the singular, God, not gods. Even in the Hebrew, Elohim could be read as a plural of majesty, a singular entity referred to in plural form out of respect. But this clearly said, they. I kept reading, and the wrongness multiplied with each verse. And they said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. That was familiar, at least. The King James Version included that plural phrasing. But what came next wasn't in any Bible I'd ever read. And they made man and set him above the earth and below the heavens as a ward between. A ward between. Between what? I flipped forward through Exodus, through Leviticus. The stories were the same, but the details kept shifting, like looking at a familiar painting and realizing the shadows are all wrong. The 10 Commandments were there, but they read like warnings instead of rules. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, for they are watching, and they hunger. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image of what dwells below. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, lest the true names be remembered. I closed the book and finished my whiskey in one swallow. It had to be a hoax, some kind of heretical version, or a creative fiction piece bound to look like scripture. But the paper was old, I could tell that much. And the printing technique, the typeface, the binding, everything about it screamed authentic 17th century craftsmanship. I should have put it away then, should have taken it back to the estate sale, or to a museum, or to one of my colleagues who specialized in biblical manuscripts. Instead, I poured another drink and kept reading. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words printed on the backs of my eyelids, glowing like they were written in phosphorescence. They are watching, and they hunger. By the time weak sunlight filtered through my bedroom window, I'd made it through the entire Pentateuch. My eyes burned, and my head throbbed, but I couldn't stop. The divergences from the canonical text weren't random. They formed a pattern, a narrative that ran parallel to the one I'd spent my entire adult life studying. In this version, the God of Abraham wasn't the supreme creator. He was something else, a warden, a jailer, and the things he'd imprisoned were older than the earth itself. I called in sick to my Monday morning class. I never call in sick. Teaching is the only structure left in my life, the only thing that makes me get out of bed and put on clean clothes. But I couldn't face a room full of students asking me about the historical Jesus when my hands were still shaking from what I'd read. Instead, I went to my office at 2 p.m, when the building would be mostly empty. I needed the university library's collection of historical texts, and I needed to work without interruption. The theology building at Whitmore is a converted church, all Gothic arches and stained glass windows that throw colored shadows across the floors. My office is in what used to be the choir loft, looking down on what's now a common area where students study and drink coffee. I locked the door behind me and spread out my materials. The strange Bible on one side of my desk, 3 different King James versions on the other, along with Hebrew and Greek reference texts, concordances, and historical analyses. For the next 6 hours, I compared them verse by verse. The story of Moses and the burning bush was fundamentally different. In the canonical version, God appears in the flame and commissions Moses to free his people. In this version, something speaks from the fire, but what it says is this: I am that which holds back the darkness. I am the seal and the chain. Lead my people from bondage, for I require their voices. I require their prayers. Without them, the deep places will remember what I have made them forget. The Exodus wasn't about freedom. It was about mobilization, building an army of worshippers whose prayers would strengthen whatever barrier this entity had constructed. By the time I looked up, the sun was setting. My throat was dry, and my back ached from hunching over the desk. But I'd found something, a reference that made my blood run cold. In Leviticus, among the laws about sacrifice and ritual purity, there was a passage I'd never seen. And thou shalt keep the covenant of silence, speaking not of those below, nor of what dwells in the deepest waters, nor of what was bound before the world was spoken into being. For thy prayers are chains, and thy faith is the lock, and should they falter, that which sleeps will wake. I sat back in my chair, the old wood creaking beneath me. Prayers are chains. Faith is the lock. What if everything I'd been teaching, everything I'd been raised to believe, was backwards? What if the churches weren't houses of worship, but prisons? What if every hymn, every prayer, every expression of faith wasn't reaching up toward heaven, but pressing down on something, trying to claw its way free? My phone buzzed. A text from the department head asking if I was feeling better. I ignored it. I needed to know where this Bible came from. The next 3 days were a blur of research. I barely ate. I slept in my office, unwilling to leave the books unattended. The janitor, a kind man named Luis, who'd worked at Whitmore for 20 years, brought me coffee and sandwiches and didn't ask questions. I found references to a suppressed printing in a 1634 letter from Archbishop William Laud to King Charles III. The letter, preserved in the university's rare documents collection, mentioned a corruption of Holy Scripture that had been mercifully discovered before distribution. All copies were to be burned, and the printer was to be questioned most thoroughly. The printer's name was John Harrison. I found his trial records in an archive of 17th century heresy cases. He'd been questioned for 3 weeks before they burned him. The charges were vague: spreading false doctrine, corrupting the word of God, traffic with infernal powers. But in his final testimony, recorded by a court scribe, Harrison said something that made my hands shake as I read it. I printed only what was given to me. The words are true words, truer than what you call holy. You burn me for revealing what your shepherds have hidden, but the seals weaken with every generation. The deep places grow restless, and when they break free, your prayers will be shown for what they are: the lullabies of fools singing to monsters in the dark. They burned him the next morning. Then they burned every document related to his trial. Except somehow, this one had survived, misfiled in a collection of land disputes from the same era. And somehow, a copy of what he'd printed had survived too. I was holding it. That night, back in my house, I made the mistake of reading Revelation. The canonical version describes the end times, the breaking of seals, the four horsemen, the final battle between good and evil, and the ultimate triumph of God over Satan. This version described the same events, but with a different interpretation that made my stomach turn. The seals aren't metaphorical, they're real, holding back something that existed before creation. The horsemen aren't bringing apocalypse, they're the heralds of release, announcing that the chains are finally breaking. The final battle isn't between God and Satan. It's between the warden and the prisoner prisoner is winning. And when the seventh seal is broken, that which was bound will remember itself. The world will forget the shape it was given. Time will run backward and forward at once, and all who worshipped in ignorance will see what they have truly been doing, feeding the prison with their devotion, strengthening the bars with their faith, singing the jailer's praises while the thing in the cell grows stronger from their attention. I slammed the book shut, but the words continued in my head. The second coming isn't salvation. It's the moment the seal breaks completely. It's the release of something so old and so vast that reality itself bends around it. And we've been praying for it. We've been begging for it. Every Sunday service, every whispered prayer, every hymn sung in faith, we've been counting down to our own annihilation. I laughed, and the sound was ugly in the empty house. All those years of seminary, all those debates about interpretation and translation, all those careful arguments about historical context and textual criticism. And the answer was simple, horrible, and hidden in plain sight. We're not worshipping God. We're feeding something we've mistaken for God, something that convinced us to worship it, to pray to it, to build churches and temples and mosques in its name, not out of love, but out of necessity, because our faith is all that's keeping something worse locked away. And according to this book, the lock is failing. I waited until Thursday to show anyone. Part of me knew I shouldn't, that some things are better left buried. But I couldn't carry this alone. The weight of it was crushing me, pressing down on my chest until every breath felt like drowning. Father Michael taught comparative religion in the office next to mine. We'd been colleagues for 2 years, friendly in the way academics are when they share a building and occasionally share a drink. He was younger than me, maybe 30, with the kind of earnest face that made students trust him with their doubts and fears. He was also a Catholic priest, though he didn't wear the collar when teaching. He told me once, over bourbon after a particularly long faculty meeting, that he'd joined the priesthood because he wanted answers. He was starting to think there weren't any. I brought the Bible to his office at 4 in the afternoon, when most of the students had gone home and the building was settling into its evening quiet. "Don," he said when he opened the door, "you look terrible. I need you to look at something." He stepped aside to let me in. His office was neater than mine, with actual filing systems and plants that weren't dead. A crucifix hung on the wall behind his desk, simple wood, nothing ornate. I set the Bible on his desk. "Is this for a class?" he asked. "Just read it. Start with Genesis." He sat down and opened the book, and I watched his face change. Confusion first, then concentration, then something else. Something that looked like recognition. He read for 20 minutes without speaking. I stood by the window, watching the shadows lengthen across the quad, listening to the sound of pages turning. Finally, he closed the book and looked up at me. His face had gone pale. "Where did you get this?" "An estate sale." "Why? Do you recognize it?" "Not exactly." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as something he did when stressed. "But I've heard of it, or something like it. There are stories in the seminary, legends, really, about a first translation that was suppressed." "What kind of legends?" He stood up and paced to the window, putting distance between himself and the book, as if proximity to it was dangerous. "During my training, there was a section on heresies. Not the famous ones, Arianism, Gnosticism, things like that, but older suppressions, knowledge that was buried. One of my professors mentioned, almost in passing, that the Vatican has materials in the secret archives that contradict accepted doctrine." "What kind of materials?" He wouldn't say, but he talked about the concept he called the beneath. He said some early church fathers believed that God wasn't the supreme being, but something more like, he struggled for the word, a guardian, protecting humanity from something older. My mouth had gone dry. Did he say what? No, but he said the knowledge was suppressed for good reason, that some truths would destroy faith, and without faith, whatever protection we have would fail. He turned back to look at me. "Don, this book, if it's what I think it is, what do you think it is? The original translation? Or close to it, before they corrected it?" He walked back to the desk but didn't touch the book. The King James Version wasn't just a translation. It was a revision. They changed things, removed things, rewrote things. I always thought it was just politics and theology. But what if they were hiding something? I sat down in his visitor's chair. My legs had been shaking for the last 10 minutes. "They've been lying to us," I said. "For 2,000 years, Christianity isn't a religion. It's a containment protocol." Michael's laugh was sharp and bitter. "And we're the containment." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the chapel bells rang for evening services. They sounded different now. Not like calls to worship, but like alarm bells, warnings. "What are you going to do?" Michael asked finally. "I don't know. People need to know the truth." "Do they?" He looked at me sharply. "What happens if you're right? What happens if you publish this, if you prove it's authentic, if you convince people that their faith has been a lie? What happens to the seal then?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. Or maybe I had, and I just hadn't wanted to face it. "Maybe it's already too late," I said. "Church attendance is down. People are leaving religion in droves. If our prayers are what's keeping this thing locked up, then it's already weakening." Michael's face had gone even paler. "That's why the weather's been wrong. Why everything feels wrong. It's not climate change or social decay. It's the seal failing." "You don't actually believe that, don't I?" He picked up the Bible, and I saw his hands were shaking. I've felt something for years now, in churches, during Mass, this sense that the prayers aren't going anywhere, that they're falling into darkness. I thought I was losing my faith. But what if I was just starting to sense the truth? He set the book down quickly, like it had burned him. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Talk to some people. The church has protocols for this sort of thing." "What kind of protocols?" "I don't know exactly. But there are people who handle theological anomalies, suppressions, things that contradict official doctrine. He was already pulling out his phone. I'll be discreet. I won't mention your name. Just don't show this to anyone else yet, okay? I agreed, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because the fear in his eyes was so naked, so real, that it made my own fear feel validated. I took the Bible and left. That was Thursday evening. By Friday morning, everything had changed. Michael didn't show up for his morning class. His office was locked, and he wasn't answering his phone. I tried calling the rectory where he lived, but the priest who answered said Father Michael had been called away suddenly. Family emergency. Michael didn't have any family. He told me that once, late at night over drinks. His parents were dead, no siblings, no one. I went back to my office and found that someone had been there. Nothing was taken, but everything was slightly wrong. Books reshelved in the wrong order. Papers on my desk moved. My computer turned off when I always left it in sleep mode. Someone had searched my office. Carefully, professionally, but they'd searched it. I looked out my window at the quad. There were 3 people standing by the fountain, not moving, not talking, just standing there, watching my building. They wore ordinary clothes, jeans, jackets, nothing remarkable. But something about the way they stood, the absolute stillness of their posture, made my skin crawl. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Don't trust them, Michael's voice, low and urgent. They came for me this morning. 3 men said they were from the diocese, but they weren't. They knew about the book. They knew I'd seen it. Michael, where are you? Leaving. They're transferring me to a monastery in Romania. Tonight. No discussion, no choice. They said it was for my own protection, but I saw their faces dawn. They were afraid, not of me, of what I'd seen. Who are they? I don't know, but they're old, older than the church, maybe as old as what that book talks about. They've been doing this for centuries, finding copies, suppressing them, silencing anyone who reads them. His voice cracked. They told me something before I got away to make this call. They said the church has always known. The Vatican, the patriarchs, the ancient orders, they've always known what God really is, what we're really doing when we pray. What are we doing? Holding back the tide. Michael laughed, and it sounded like a sob. They said faith is declining, just like you said. The seal is weakening. They're trying to slow it down, but they can't stop it. Nobody can. It's too late. Michael, they asked me where you live. I didn't tell them, but they'll find out. They'll come for you, and they'll come for the book. Hide it, Don, or destroy it. But don't try to publish it. Don't try to spread the truth, because the truth is worse than the lie. What do you mean? There was a long pause. I could hear traffic in the background, horns honking. He was calling from somewhere public, somewhere he thought was safe. What we call God, Michael said slowly, may simply be the warden, and we've been feeding the prisoner. The line went dead. I looked out the window again. The 3 people by the fountain were gone. But now there was a car parked across the street, engine running, windows tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside. I grabbed the Bible and left. I drove for hours with no destination, just trying to put distance between myself and those watches, between myself and whatever agency Michael had stumbled into. The Bible sat on the passenger seat, and I swear I could feel it humming, a vibration too low to hear but felt in my bones. I ended up at a motel off I-91, the kind of place that takes cash and doesn't ask questions. Room 217, with brown carpet and a television that only got 3 channels. I locked the door, engaged the chain, and pushed the dresser in front of it for good measure. Then I sat on the bed and opened the Bible to where I'd left off. I'd read most of it by now, but there was a section I'd been avoiding, a passage that didn't appear in any canonical Bible, tucked between the end of Revelation and what should have been the back cover. It wasn't numbered like the other chapters. It had no title, just text in the same typeface as the rest, but somehow it looked darker on the page, as if the ink had been pressed deeper into the paper. I started reading. To those who find this testament, know that we are damned for giving it to you, as you will be damned for reading it. But the lie has been maintained long enough. The people deserve to know what they worship and why. In the time, before the first day, before light was separated from darkness, there was something. Not God as we understand it, not a being with consciousness or will, but a presence, an awareness, vast and ancient and utterly incomprehensible to creatures bound by time and form. It had no name then. It has no name now that can be spoken without breaking the mind that tries to speak it. But it existed in a state we would now call pure potential, unformed, unbound, capable of being anything and everything at once. Then something happened. We do not know what or why or who caused it, but a portion of that vast awareness became limited, bound, forced into a shape, given boundaries, trapped in what we would call space and time. It screamed. Of course it screamed. Imagine being infinite and suddenly finding yourself finite. Imagine being everything and suddenly being only one thing. From that scream, reality was born. The universe exploded into being from the violence of that binding. Matter condensed from the fury of it. Time began ticking forward from the moment of that imprisonment. And the thing that did the binding, the force that took something infinite and made it finite, that took something formless and gave it form. We call it God. But God is not what we thought. God is the jailer, not the prisoner, the warden, not the inmate, and the prisoner is what we've been worshipping. Because here is the terrible truth. The thing that was bound, the vast awareness that was forced into limits, it did not simply accept its fate. It could not break free. The binding was too strong, woven from the fabric of reality itself. But it could influence. It could whisper. It could reach through the bars of its cage and touch the minds of the creatures that evolved in the universe, born from its suffering. It taught them to pray. It taught them to worship. It taught them rituals and hymns and the architecture of faith. And every prayer, every act of devotion, every expression of faith, all of it flows down, not up, down to the thing in the cage, feeding it, strengthening it, giving it the energy it needs to slowly, carefully, over thousands of years, weaken the binding that holds it. God knew this would happen. The true God, the warden. That's why the commandments exist. Not as arbitrary rules, but as warnings. Don't speak the true names. Don't look upon certain things. Don't let your worship become too fervent, too consuming, because fervent worship feeds the prisoner. The prophets understood this dimly. The early church fathers knew it. That's why they rewrote the scriptures. That's why they suppressed the true translations. They were trying to maintain a balance, enough faith to keep people obedient, but not so much that it would hasten the breaking of the seal. But they failed. They always knew they would fail. Faith is declining now, yes? Church is empty, prayers unspoken. But paradoxically, this doesn't weaken the prisoner, because the energy of worship has been accumulating for millennia. It's saturated the seal. And now that seal is failing not from lack of faith, but from the weight of too much faith over too long a time. The prisoner is nearly free. And when it breaks loose, when the binding finally shatters, reality will remember what it was before. The universe will unmake itself. Time will cease to flow forward. Matter will lose its shape. But consciousness will remain. That's the worst part. We will remain aware as everything dissolves, as the stars blink out and space folds in on itself, as the laws of physics forget how to work and causation becomes meaningless. We will be absorbed back into the prisoner. Every human who ever lived, every thought ever thought, every feeling ever felt, all of it will be pulled back into that vast awareness that was bound at the beginning of everything. And we will exist there forever, in a state of eternal, undifferentiated consciousness. No death, because death requires time, and there will be no more time. No relief, because relief requires change, and nothing will ever change again. Just awareness, forever, in the primordial chaos that existed before the world. This is what we've been praying for. This is what every religious person who ever asked for the second coming has been begging for. Not salvation, but annihilation. Not heaven, but the end of everything that makes heaven possible. We are the architects of our own unmaking. To whoever reads this, you cannot stop it. You can hide this book, burn it, bury it. You can refuse to believe what you've read, but the truth remains true regardless of your belief. The seal is failing. The prisoner is waking, and soon, very soon, it will be free. May God, the true God, the warden, forgive us for failing to keep the secret. Written in the year of our Lord 1611 by those who translated the word and saw the truth behind it. We go now to our deaths, knowing we have betrayed both heaven and earth by creating this testament. But someone must know. Someone must understand what's coming. When you feel the world start to come apart, remember you were warned. The passage ended there. I sat on the motel bed, the Bible heavy in my lap, and I couldn't move. Outside, I heard a car engine, footsteps on the walkway, a knock at the door. Professor Wilson, we know you're in there. We just want to talk. The voice was calm, reasonable, entirely unthreatening, which somehow made it more terrifying. I looked at the Bible, then at the window, then back at the door. The knock came again, harder this time. We're not here to hurt you, Professor. We're here to help. We're here to explain. But I didn't want their explanations. I didn't want their help. I grabbed the Bible and I went to the bathroom window. It took me 40 minutes of back roads and paranoid detours before I was sure they weren't following me. The car sputtered twice, threatening to die, but I kept pushing it through the dark Connecticut hills until I reached the coast. I don't know why I went to the ocean. Maybe because water has always meant clarity to me, meant thinking through problems until solutions emerge. Maybe because some part of me knew this was where it had to end, one way or another. I parked at a rest stop overlooking Long Island Sound. It was nearly 3 in the morning. The parking lot was empty, just me and the sound of waves against rocks and the distant bell of a buoy tolling in the dark. I sat in the car with the engine off and forced myself to think clearly. The Bible sat on the passenger seat. I hadn't opened it since the motel, hadn't dared to. The passage I'd read was still burned into my mind, every word of it glowing like afterimages every time I closed my eyes. 3 options presented themselves, clear as the stars emerging from behind the clouds. First, I could destroy it, burn it, shred it, throw it into the ocean and let the water take it down to the depths, and no one would ever find it. The knowledge would die with the book. I would spend the rest of my life wondering if any of it was real, if I'd had some kind of breakdown, if the whole thing was an elaborate hoax that had somehow fooled me completely. But the people who'd come to the motel would still be out there. Michael would still be on his way to Romania. And somewhere, the seal would keep failing, whether anyone knew about it or not. Second, I could take it public, scan every page, post it online, send copies to newspapers and television stations and every religious studies department in the world. Force the truth out into the open. Let humanity see what we've really been doing for the last 2,000 years. But what then? Mass panic, the collapse of every major religion. And if the passage was true, if faith had been feeding the prisoner all along, what would happen when billions of people suddenly stopped praying? Would it accelerate the collapse? Or would it finally starve the thing we'd been feeding? I didn't know. Nobody knew. And that uncertainty felt like a blade against my throat. Third, I could do nothing. Take the Bible somewhere safe. Bury it where only I could find it. And live with the weight of knowing. Keep teaching my classes. Keep existing in a world where I understood the horrible truth but couldn't share it, couldn't act on it, couldn't do anything but watch and wait for reality to come apart. I got out of the car and walked to the edge of the overlook. A metal railing separated me from a 50-foot drop to the rocks below. The sound stretched out black and infinite under the starlight. The Bible felt heavier with every step. I could feel it now, what that final passage had described. Something vast, far below, not below the earth, not below the ocean, below reality itself, pressed against the thin places where the seal was weakening. I'd felt it before, in churches during particularly fervent services, in the moments between sleep and waking, in the silence after prayers, but I'd always attributed it to my imagination, to exhaustion, to anything but the truth. Now I couldn't pretend anymore. It was there. It had always been there, and it was stirring. I opened the Bible one last time, to a random page. The book fell open to Psalms, to a passage I'd memorized as a child. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. But in this version, the verse continued. For beneath the still waters, In the deep places where light does not reach, the shepherd keeps watch over that which must never wake, and we are the flock whose bleating maintains the vigil. Pray we never fall silent. I closed the book and looked out at the ocean. Headlights swept across the parking lot. A car pulling in, moving slowly, searching. I ducked behind my car and watched. 3 people got out. The same 3 I'd seen on campus. I was sure of it. They moved with that same unnatural stillness, spreading out to search the area. One of them walked right past where I was crouched. In the starlight, I could see his face clearly for the first time. His eyes were wrong. Not the color or the shape, but the way they moved. Too fluid, too aware, like something was looking out from behind them. Something that didn't quite know how to wear a human face. I held my breath until he passed. When they were on the far side of the parking lot, I moved. Not back to my car. They'd checked that first. Instead, I went over the railing, finding handholds in the rocks, climbing down toward the water. The Bible was tucked into my jacket, pressed against my chest. The climb took forever. Twice I nearly fell, fingers slipping on wet stone, feet finding nothing but air. But I made it down to a small strip of beach, barely 6 feet wide, littered with driftwood and trash that had washed up on the tide. I could hear them above me, calling to each other in voices that sounded almost, but not quite human. I pulled out the Bible and stood at the water's edge. This was the moment. Throw it in. Let the ocean take it. Let the truth drown in the depths. Or keep it. Keep knowing. Keep carrying this weight until it crushed me or I found some way to use it. The water lapped at my shoes. It was cold, shockingly cold. The kind of cold that makes you understand why sailors feared the sea. I held the Bible over the water, and I couldn't do it because destroying the book wouldn't change what I knew. It wouldn't unknow the truth or unfeel that presence beneath reality. And somewhere in the world, maybe there were others like me, others who'd found copies, who'd read the suppressed texts, who'd started to understand. Maybe we needed to know. Maybe humanity deserved the truth, even if the truth was annihilation. Or maybe that was exactly the kind of thinking that would hasten the end. I pulled the Bible back and sat down on the cold rocks. Above me, I heard footsteps on the overlook. A flashlight beam swept across the water, passing just over my head. "He's not here," one of them said. "Check the car again. He can't have gone far. We'll find him." But they wouldn't, because I'd made my decision. I stayed on that beach until dawn, until the sun came up over the sound and turned the water gold. The people searching for me gave up around 5 in the morning. I heard their car leave, but I waited another hour to be sure. When I finally climbed back up, my car was still there. They'd broken the driver's side window and searched it thoroughly. But they hadn't taken anything because there was nothing to take. The Bible was with me, wrapped in my jacket, pressed against my ribs like a second heart. I drove home as the world woke up around me. People jogging, walking dogs, heading to church for early service. Normal Sunday morning activities, everyone moving through their routines, completely unaware of what lurked beneath the comfortable surface of reality. The church bells were ringing as I pulled into my driveway. I sat in the car and listened to them. They sounded the same as always, calling the faithful to worship. But now I understood what those bells really meant. Every toll, another link in the chain. Every call to prayer, another stone in the prison wall. Or maybe another crack in the foundation. I went inside and slept for 16 hours. When I woke up, it was Monday evening. I'd missed all my classes. My phone had 37 missed calls and twice as many texts. The department head, colleagues, students, everyone wondering where I'd gone. I deleted them all without reading. The Bible was on my kitchen table. I'd left it there when I stumbled in yesterday morning, too exhausted to hide it, too numb to care. Now I stood in the doorway and looked at it. A simple book, black leather, gold edges, the kind of Bible you'd see in any church, any bookstore, any hotel room. Except it wasn't. It was the truth we'd been hiding from for 2,000 years, and I had no idea what to do with it. I made coffee and sat at the table. The house was too quiet. It's always too quiet, but now the silence felt like a presence, like something waiting and watching. I could feel it in the walls, in the floorboards, in the space between heartbeats. I thought about Michael, somewhere over the Atlantic by now, being taken to a monastery where he'd spend the rest of his life in silence. I thought about the watchers, whoever or whatever they really were, still searching for me. I thought about the seal, failing inch by inch, year by year. And I thought about all the people in churches right now, heads bowed in prayer, thinking they were reaching toward heaven when they were really feeding something in the depths. Should I tell them? Could I tell them? Would it even matter? I opened the Bible to the final passage again, the one from the translators. Read it through once more, looking for something I'd missed. Some hint of hope, some suggestion of a way out. But there wasn't one. There never had been. You cannot stop it, they'd written. The seal is failing. I closed the book and looked out my kitchen window at the ordinary Monday evening. Streetlights flickering on, neighbors coming home from work, the world continuing to turn, oblivious. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Moments later, I heard the message play. Professor Wilson, this is Dean Hartley. I'm concerned about your absence today. Please call me back as soon as you can. If you're having some kind of emergency, we can arrange for coverage, but I need to hear from you. I erased the message. The truth was, I didn't know what I was going to do. Go back to teaching, pretend everything was normal, stand in front of a classroom and lecture about the historical Jesus and Pauline theology when I knew it was all built on a lie, when I knew that every prayer, every hymn, every expression of faith was tightening the chains on something that wanted to unmake the universe? Or should I disappear? Take the Bible somewhere remote, somewhere no one would think to look. Become a hermit, a keeper of forbidden knowledge, spending the rest of my life watching for signs of the seal's collapse. I poured another cup of coffee and realized my hands were shaking. 4 weeks passed. I went back to teaching. What else could I do? I stood in front of my classes and taught the same material I'd always taught, but the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Every time a student asked about faith, about belief, about the nature of God, I had to physically stop myself from telling them the truth. The watchers hadn't come back. Or if they had, they were being more subtle about it. Sometimes I'd see someone across campus who didn't quite move right, didn't quite fit, but they never approached me. never tried to take the Bible. Maybe they'd realized I wasn't going to publish it. Maybe they were just watching, making sure I kept quiet. I hid the Bible in a safe deposit box at a bank across town. Every few days, I'd go visit it just to make sure it was still there, still real. Part of me kept hoping I'd open the box and find it empty, or find a normal Bible in its place. Proof that I'd imagined everything, that I'd had some kind of breakdown and hallucinated the whole thing. But it was always there, waiting. I tried to research the seal, to find some way to slow its decay or reverse it, but there was nothing. Or if there was, it was buried even deeper than the Bible had been. The church's secret archives weren't accessible to someone like me, and I couldn't risk drawing more attention by asking the wrong questions. So I waited and watched and felt something vast stirring in the spaces between spaces. The world felt different now, wrong somehow. Little things at first, birds flying in strange patterns, clouds that moved against the wind, shadows that fell at the wrong angle. Most people didn't notice, or if they did, they rationalized it. Weather patterns, tired eyes, stress. But I knew what it meant. The seal was failing faster now. Church attendance kept declining. Every week, the pews emptier, the prayers fewer, and I couldn't decide if that was good or bad. Were we finally starving the prisoner? Or was it too late, the damage already done? Millennia of faith having already fed it enough to break free. I started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly. Nightmares end when you wake up. These were something else. Visions, maybe. Glimpses of what's coming. I see the moment when the seal breaks. It's not dramatic. No trumpets, no angels. Just a small sound, like glass cracking. And then reality begins to fold. Time runs backward and forward at once. Cause and effect divorce each other. Matter, remembers, is just energy pretending to be solid. And beneath it all, something wakes. Something that's been sleeping in the foundation of the universe since before the first day. It opens eyes that aren't really eyes. It stretches limbs that aren't really limbs. And it's hungry, not for flesh or blood or souls, hungry for what it lost when it was bound, hungry to be infinite again, to be everywhere and everything, to pull the entire universe back into itself and dissolve it into undifferentiated awareness. In the dream, I feel it happening. I feel myself coming apart, my consciousness separating from my body, my identity dissolving. And the worst part is the relief, because in that moment of dissolution, all the fear and pain and loneliness stops. Everything stops. And then I wake up, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, and the relief is gone, but the fear remains. That's when I know I can't do nothing. I'm writing this down now, typing it out on my laptop at 3 a.m. while the house creaks and settles around me. I don't know what I'll do with it yet. Publish it online, send it to news outlets, leave it for someone to find after I'm gone. The Bible is still in the safe deposit box. I could get it right now if I wanted to. I have the key in my pocket, always. I carry it everywhere, this small piece of metal that grants access to the most dangerous book in the world. Sometimes I feel it stirring in the dark. Not the Bible itself, but what the Bible describes. That vast presence beneath reality, that prisoner in the foundation of everything. And I wonder if our prayers are reaching up, or if they've always been reaching down. I wonder if something down there hears us, and if it's grateful or hungry. But mostly, I wonder if there's any difference. The sun will be up in a few hours. Students will go to class. People will go to work. The world will keep turning, at least for now. And I'll keep teaching, keep pretending, keep carrying the weight of what I know. But the seal is failing. I can feel it every day, cracks spreading through the foundation of reality. And sooner or later, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 100, it will break completely. When it does, when that vast awareness finally remembers itself and reality begins to unmake, I hope I'm wrong. I hope the translators were wrong. I hope this is all just an elaborate hoax, a historical curiosity, a weird artifact that fooled a theology professor having a midlife crisis. But I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think they were wrong, and I think we're running out of time. The church bells just started ringing for morning service. 4 blocks away, at St. Augustine's. I can hear them clearly in the pre-dawn silence. They sound like a countdown,